Hello, welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Jack Mallers. Jack is the CEO and founder of Strike, the global Bitcoin app. He joins us again after having joined us a couple of years ago and told us all about what's going on in Strike. And I look forward to hearing all the updates about all the kind of exciting things that you guys have been up to. Welcome, Jack.
Safe, it is a pleasure, man. You're one of the one in Bitcoin has transformed my life. Arguably the most. I eat steaks and I think about money differently because of you. So it's always an honor, man. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. That makes me so happy to hear people are eating steaks because of me.
I mean, you have transformed the way I think about, more than just money, health, and the destruction fiat's done to the world. My diet, my time preference, you've been a huge influence to me. I got into Bitcoin when I was a teenager. So a lot of my formative years, I was reading your work. So I really have tons of respect and appreciation for all you've done.
Well, thank you, sir. It is mutual. I have a lot of appreciation for what you've done. You're allowing a lot of people from all over the world to get on Bitcoin, figure it out, and use it easily and access it, which is an enormously valuable thing because this is an enormously valuable opportunity for people to get on Bitcoin, and it's not easy to find a way for doing it. But Strike makes it possible. For our listeners who are not very familiar, can you just give us a brief sketch of what it is that Strike does?
Yeah, we've really turned into a global Bitcoin financial services platform. So a lot of our earlier years were Lightning focused, but we've evolved into just listening to customers and Bitcoiners and being a laser-focused, regulated, compliant Bitcoin financial services company, which our biggest business line is selling Bitcoin. We sell a lot of Bitcoin to customers, but customers also use us for custody. Customers use us for wallet services. Customer uses us for payments. We have a developers platform, but the opportunity I think we've evolved to fill within the market is that we see Bitcoin as the opportunity, and we didn't see any Bitcoin companies. That was really the demand we got from our customers. Is Coinbase is a crypto exchange, BlackRock is an asset manager. As good as Sailor has been for Bitcoin, they don't build Bitcoin financial services. They build B2B intelligence software, and they use capital market access to buy Bitcoin. And so there was a desire for Bitcoiners to have high quality, trusted financial services. And so we really evolved to provide that in now over 100 markets. And it's gone really well. And it's a really fulfilling business to run because we have a really special relationship with our customers and with Bitcoiners at large. So about 4.5 years since founding it. And really, this is our, third and a half year of real products in the market. It's been a wild ride, but that's where we are.
Yeah, it's excellent. And you guys are available in pretty much all the world. Anybody can use you from all over the world, but you allow people to send money even through fiat bank accounts in a way that is faster than using regular bank accounts, right?
Yeah, 100%. We think Bitcoin is transformative for all aspects of money. The biggest, I will say very transparently, the biggest business line for us, the reason we're profitable, pay bills, is because of the buy-sell aspect. I do think that that's the predominant use case, is just the world's going through a wealth transfer and cash balances are being transferred into Bitcoin, and we've been able to monetize that and win customers there. Our biggest markets are, it's very obvious. United States is our biggest market. Why? Because the United States has the biggest cash balances in the world. That's why. It's got the biggest GDP. It's the wealthiest. Second for us is Europe, but predominantly markets like Germany. And then the UK follows in suit. So we are available globally, but our most popular products, our highest volume products, are buying Bitcoin, storing Bitcoin, moving it on chain to cold storage, and that's predominantly in the West. And then it is interesting because our second biggest KYC bill for a long time, so it's a metric to understand how many customers I'm onboarding in each market, because I have to pay a KYC vendor, very unfortunately, to KYC my customers. And outside of America, it was Nigeria and Argentina. And so We're seeing a lot of action. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of action in these markets, but there's not a lot of wealth there. There's not a lot of what you describe as cash balances. And so the business lines and the user behavior and where these people are finding value in Bitcoin is remarkably different. And so that's where some of our cross-border payment services, We have a Tether product where we global South product, so to speak. We offer Tether and Bitcoin as opposed to local currency and Bitcoin because they don't want their local currency. And so I would say in a lot of those Southern markets, it's a very different product. It's optimizing more for payments, cross-border payments, wallet services, where in the West, we just sell a lot of Bitcoin and we see the user behavior of buy Bitcoin, withdraw it off the exchange, put it in cold storage. That's like who our customer is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, as you said, I think that's very correct. It's an issue of cash balances. And so in the places like the US, people have large cash balances. And so they have large amount of disposable cash that they could put into Bitcoin. So if they catch the orange bug or take the orange pill, they have disposable income that they could put into Bitcoin. They have savings that they could put into Bitcoin, and then they start stacking, and then they see the number go up. Technology begin to do its magic, and then it becomes like an addiction. They want to stack more and stack more and stack more, and they start seeing their wealth going into places they never thought it could get to, and then it leads to almost like spiraling into an addiction, but in a good way, where you spiral. Your life spirals into control, and you start reducing your spending on all kinds of terrible things and start increasing your spending on saving, which is essentially providing for your future. But yeah, I would imagine that in countries where people don't have a lot of savings, in the countries where their local currency has been getting destroyed, people don't have enough cash balances, but they need their Bitcoin for settling financial services, for using financial services across borders, for sending money and so on. And it's very interesting that you say Nigeria and Argentina, because yeah, these are relatively large countries that have had large currency problems. Have you been noticing, have you tried to do analysis of volume of transactions that you guys get when currencies begin to collapse? Or have you witnessed this kind of relationship? So when the Naira in Nigeria begins to crash, do people start buying more? Do you notice these kind of relationships, or is it still too early?
It's honestly, I think it's still too early. We do see pretty interesting things, but I wouldn't be confident enough to get on your podcast and say them as fact. The data is still, like our Lightning Network data relative to the rest of our data is still oftentimes like a rounding error. And that's me just being honest. What I learned, this is my first entrepreneurial endeavor ever as a man. and what I thought my job was as a CEO and a founder is to really predict the future on behalf of my customers. And what I realized my job is to listen to customers and provide them value based on what they need. And so, I think what we're seeing is it's still too early in these markets. A lot of the volume in these markets, by the way, is not on exchanges like ours. It's in Telegram chats. It's in WhatsApp chats. It is OTC black market. And so it's hard to actually get a gauge on user trends, behavior, what the real total volume is. You see metrics like Nigeria is the highest volume Bitcoin market in the world. But then, it's hard to actually determine, is that because of P2P markets? Because when you look in things like Coinbase, they're not reflective at all. And so it's, where is this volume happening? You look on Binance Coinbase, it's not there, but it seems to be in these like WhatsApp Telegram groups. So I'd say it's a little too early. And the biggest takeaway for us in running a business, I learn a lot about Bitcoin, obviously, because I get to see behind the scenes a little bit, is that Bitcoin is demonetizing other assets that were monetized previously because they had to be. And so it's very obvious to us that our customers are selling their second home and buying Bitcoin, transitioning out of their stock portfolio and buying Bitcoin, selling their fine art and buying Bitcoin. And so we see the opportunity in, okay, this is a wealth transfer. Where does the wealth exist today? Predominantly in these more developed markets where people have excess assets and assets that have appreciated tremendously since the divorce of the gold standard. And so a lot of our growth and largest volume is helping customers transfer wealth from archaic assets that don't make any sense anymore because of Bitcoin into Bitcoin, and then helping them secure it, and then helping them get it into cold storage. And for a lot of the emerging markets where they don't have the opportunity to be a part of that wealth transfer because they don't have any assets to begin with or any excess cash balances, that's where we see trends like Lightning being used. We see trends like stable coins being demanded. We see trends like P2P markets and black market behaviors. But it's still really, really early. And I'd wager to say that no one's really figured that out, not even the Binances and the Coinbases. So it's a big opportunity. I think we're really well positioned because of our focus on Bitcoin. We don't get distracted by other things. And so we feel good about where we are, not to talk down on any of these markets or technologies, but it is remarkably more early. Like, we get customers in America that are just wiring us $25 million and saying, I'm done with my S&P 500 portfolio. I want Bitcoin. And that's a high level of conviction, a crazy change in consumer behavior driven by inflation, understanding of money, and understanding of savings and preservation of wealth, where that level of clarity just doesn't exist, I think, in a lot of like the retail customers in some of these smaller markets.
Yeah, I would have expected this to be the case. I mean, it's still, Bitcoin is now currently at around $1.4 trillion, which is truly miraculous to think that it's gone from zero to $1.4 trillion in about 14 years, because nothing has ever gotten that big that fast. Think about all the trillion-dollar companies that exist. It took all of them a lot more than just 14, or in case of Bitcoin, I think it was around 11 years to get to the first trillion. It took Apple and Amazon a lot longer to do that. So it's truly miraculous that it got this big. And yet, compared to its total addressable market, it's still a rounding error, because the total addressable market for money is infinitely larger than all the markets that are addressed by Apple, by Amazon, by all of these massive companies. You'd think these companies are big, and of course they do have a massive addressable market. Apple can sell 8 billion iPhones, but that's it. There's a limit. At the end of the day, 8 billion people can each have one iPhone. A few weirdos might want to have two for whatever reason, but that's about it. 10 billion iPhones, and that's the limit. But that's still around not so big compared to the market for money, which is what Bitcoin is addressing. So the total addressable market for money, as I like to calculate it, is probably in the range of about $200 to $300 trillion, which is a number beyond most people's ability to imagine, because that's 200 to 300 million dollars. So imagine $1 million, imagine a million of these $1 million, and then imagine it 200 to 300 times. And that's the market for Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin is up for, because that's how much people keep in cash balances. And if you think of it, the way that I like to calculate it is there's about $100 trillion in government money and in bank accounts. People have cash balances there. And you should also count government bonds, because that's the equivalent of cash balances. People hold those things as cash effectively, because they expect the dollar and national currencies to devalue. So at least they hold the bonds, which at least offer them some yield, which in theory at least should protect them against the devaluation of currencies. Although anybody holding bonds and listening right now might be laughing at that theory, considering how things have gone for the bond market in the last 2-3 years. They've underperformed the dollar, which is quite a feat. But yeah, that's another $100 trillion. And then you add in the second homes that people buy just because they don't want to keep their money in their bank, or because they don't know where to put their money. Think about the stocks that people just buy as passive investors without thinking about the investment case for the stocks. This is all effectively cash in my mind. So that's $300 trillion. So Bitcoin has still got another 200x to go to truly capture its entire market. And so that's why I still think it's not surprising that you don't see these kind of macro trends reflected in your data, because it's still, it's only 0.5% roughly of the world's cash balances. And so 0.5% of Nigerians' cash balances, 0.5% of Argentinians' cash balances, 0.5% of Americans' cash balances in Bitcoin. All of them together, because it's such a huge market, is still enormous, but you still struggle to see the overall macro trends reflected in these things. It's going to take us another 10x. So, the way things are going, maybe next month till.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. We as a company, so we went through a similar exercise, and yeah, we land somewhere between 100 to 900 trillion dollars. And we just think of monetizable assets. So you've got collectibles and art and gold, and that's where, Bitcoin is approaching that value. Then equities is a step up, housing is a step up. Then obviously bonds. We think bonds of like the holy mother Mecca. It's like the creme de la creme. And that's the size of and pool of capital that is tremendous. Now you can land somewhere between the lower estimate and the upper bound, because Bitcoin won't demonetize them entirely, and that there's still value in owning equity in a business and owning a home. You do have to live somewhere, but using them as money and a store of value should be entirely demonetized. And we think of it internally as, and I've even said as much externally, I think money is our time and energy in an abstracted form. It's human effort, right? It's human labor. And so that's kind of the size of market and opportunity that we think we're going after, is providing next level financial services for everyone's time, energy, and effort to save, store, and exchange into the future. And for that reason, running a business like Strike, it's very rare. You rarely have a business that's vision can last 100 years, right? A bakery's vision doesn't last 100 years. Even a business like Square and Cash App and Jack Dorsey, who I'm a friend of and very big fan of, he's had to reinvent that company a few times over. They initially were a card reader, then he built the Cash App, then he acquired a music business. It's very difficult to be in business for that long. And so the idea that we have a business that's going to be here in 100 years, there's so much upside and value for us to go, is like really, really exciting. And so that's why we run the business profitably. We run it patiently. We have extremely low time preference. We only listen to customers. We don't need to pour money into growth. We don't need to pour money into excess products and venture. And we try and optimize to be here in 100 years because the opportunity is so big, and because it's a business that's really unique in that way. So I agree with everything you said, straight up. And yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is that sometimes I think Bitcoiners, well, I know not you, but some Bitcoiners are a little embarrassed to say they care about the price. Like I hate the line, I'm not in it for the price. I'm in it for the technology. And that's just not true, because you want to know the number one KPI or metric that'll tell you a lot about our numbers is the price. Why? Because the price is a reflection of how much of the world is using Bitcoin as money. Quite literally, it is the perfect metric. And so something that we see all the time is when the price goes up, our numbers go up. And so we also kind of ride this macro trend that is Bitcoin and its market cap. And so we optimize too to make sure that we're sustainable when Bitcoin's going down, and we're ready to capitalize and serve customers and scale when Bitcoin goes up. And that's also just a fact about the company. And sometimes you hear Bitcoiners, I don't know what it is, if it's they're ashamed to admit or they feel guilty because they've benefited so much from an open source technology, but it's like the price absolutely matters. It is a reflection of how successful this thing is being at money. And as a business, if you want to get to know how well Strike is doing, just open a Bitcoin chart and you can kind of follow our journey.
Yeah, it's very true for all kinds of businesses. And I agree with you entirely. I think the technology is the price. I mean, that's it. That's really the measure of how well the technology is working. It's the price. That's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is producing a monetary asset. And if the price of Bitcoin is 10 cents, that means the total market cap of Bitcoin is about $2 million. That means Bitcoin is just a hobby for some kids in their mom's basement playing around with magic pretend money. That's something that shouldn't be taken seriously. 15 years on, Bitcoin is at 10 cents. It's pretty much over already. That's not going anywhere. Nobody cares. And the size of the market is tiny. That means that you can't hold serious quantities of it. If you had $1 million and you wanted to buy in an asset whose entire capitalization is $2 million, that would be completely unworkable, because as you start buying, you're going to bid the price up enormously, and then you're going to buy at a very high price, and then every time you're going to sell, you're going to cause the price to crash. So it would be very reckless to do something like this. As the price goes up, your ability to acquire Bitcoin, your ability to put cash into Bitcoin increases. The amount of cash balances in Bitcoin goes up. So Bitcoin at $1 million or at $1.5 million is larger than the treasury market. It becomes the biggest market in the world, the deepest market in the world. It becomes the place where all of the world's sovereign wealth funds and central banks want to have a position, because it's somewhere where you can get in and out with, say, $1 billion and not even cause a splash and not even cause a serious impact on the price. So I think the reason people don't like to focus on the price, I think there are two motivations that I can identify. The first one is what Mises called the anti-capitalist mentality, which is something that has been drilled into us over the last century by governments and by government propaganda and by people who benefit from making you poor by trying to get you to accept the fact that you're poor and to think of you being rich as being a bad thing. And I think a lot of people have this idea that if you work hard, if you make money, and if you've earned the money, then that's somehow a character flaw on your part, that you're not a good person because you got rich. This is unfortunately very predominant. Perhaps it's not as predominant in the US as in other parts of the world, because there is still a capitalist culture in the US, at least more than the rest of the world. But I'd say places like in Europe, in Africa, and in Asia, this is quite common, that people look down on the rich. People see that being rich necessarily means that you're taking money away from others, rather than understanding that in a capitalist society, being rich means that you're producing things of value for others. And it means, in fact, specifically, that you produce things that are more valuable to those people than the money that they've given you. So if you've made $1,000,000 selling a product, that means people valued what you gave them more than the $1,000,000 that you've made, because otherwise they wouldn't have given you the $1,000,000. So everybody who gave you money benefited from that. Of course, it's not always the case, because the more fiat corruption we have in a society, the more people we have who got rich without having to actually serve others. So they got rich through connections, through corruption, through theft, through government favoritism. And that, unfortunately, in societies where that is prevalent, that colors the conception that people have of money entirely. So people just think of that as being money. And so you see that, unfortunately, in Bitcoin, that a lot of people come into Bitcoin and think of it as being, well, I'm not into it for the price. I don't care about the price. I'm in it for the technology. And I really feel sorry for people like that. I mean, imagine having gotten into Bitcoin at a low price and spent years working on, say, coding Bitcoin or trying to get it, and you haven't shared in the upside. I mean, it's sad because you didn't make money, but on a very serious level, if you really care about the technology, the best thing you can do to move the technology forward for the vast majority of people is help by growing the size of everybody else's cash balances by buying up the coins. The more coins you buy, the higher the price goes, the more valuable the cash balances are for everybody else, the more Bitcoin is money. So it's not something that we should be ashamed of. And I think the second explanation for why people look down on price as a measure of Bitcoin, I think is, unfortunately, it's shitcoins. A lot of the hype behind shitcoins has always been, oh, look at all those Bitcoiners, they care about the price. But my shitcoin, don't worry about the price. We're going to do something very technologically advanced. And I'm going to, since you're not worried about the price, I'm going to have a 70% pre-mine of the currency, and I'm going to dump on you. And as the price continues to drop over year after year, please be sure to continue to hold as much as you can and to keep buying more and more. Because remember, you're in it for the technology. So don't worry about my 70% pre-mine and my ability to buy an island for myself thanks to you. What matters is the technology. Hopefully the technology will deliver. It's a very common thing. You see it so often that the shitcoiners are usually talking trash about Bitcoiners because Bitcoiners care about the price, whereas the shitcoiners, they only care about the pre-mine, not the price.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I know that money, listen, humans do work. We contribute. Like, the only things we really have is time on this planet and in our lives, and we express it through the energy we contribute. And then we have to make decisions in how that work is stored. And I can get compensated in autographed baseball cards, dollars, gold, Bitcoin, and that's my choice and how I store the effort that I contribute. And I want to save it and exchange it later. And the price just tells us how many people are making the choice of Bitcoin. So it's quite literally an adoption metric of how much of the world's effort is being stored in this money that we care about. And as it grows, there's obvious network effects and economies of scale with money. We all know that. And so to me, not valuing the price is a fundamental misunderstanding that Bitcoin is money. And that, again, money is technology. It's not like a construct. We can't all agree that water bottles are money and make them money. Money is designed to solve this very particular problem. And the more people pick Bitcoin as their solution and opt into using this technology as the money, then the better all of the other holders of the money, the better the world, because of the belief system and the way it was designed and all that we subscribe to. So I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding to be candid. Like someone, to me, if you don't value the price of Bitcoin, then you don't fundamentally understand it and understand money for that matter. And we honestly, the last thing on Strike, it's just interesting some of the insights I get. What's interesting is a lot of our growth, especially recently, we're not necessarily seeing new entrants from, the pre-coin or fiat world into the industry yet. I don't think we're at the point where we're on the headline of every magazine and Bitcoin's CNBC topic every single day and Super Bowl ads and Sam Bankman-Fried's hanging out with Tom Brady. We're not at those levels. What we're seeing is our customers start off buying shit coins on shitcoin exchanges. And then once you understand money and you understand Bitcoin rapidly it's not 1% of your net worth. It becomes 25, 50%, 75%, and it becomes your entire cash balance, your entire life savings. And that's where we get customers actually from other shitcoin casinos when people finally understand Bitcoin and they need to wire a lot of money and convert a lot of cash balance and work with an institution they actually trust. And that's really like the behavior I see. And again, that's the decision at the margin of someone saying, I have effort and time and energy I've contributed to this world, and I'm choosing Bitcoin to store that. And that's really what the adoption of Bitcoin until we're at a Bitcoin standard fundamentally is, like just flat out 100%. And so, I don't understand at all when people say the price doesn't matter. It's the metric that matters the most, if not like the only metric that matters.
Yeah, it's like people saying I'm interested in the technology behind cars, but I'm not interested in transportation. Like, I don't want to move anywhere. I don't want to move. I don't care if people move. I care about the technology of cars. I care about getting under the hood and playing around with the engine, just for shits and giggles. Not about actually getting that engine to work in a way that is useful, which is to get people to move from A to B. But that's what money does. Money is a way for you to hold value and move it across time and space. And so if the price crashes continuously and it doesn't appreciate, then that technology is as useful as a car that can't move.
And what's interesting too, on your comment on, society doesn't like rich people or makes people with a lot of money feel bad about themselves and demonizes them. What's fascinating is, I'm a millennial. So at the age group where my friends that I've grown up with we're all becoming adults, and in a way that you want to be a homeowner, you want to be a dad or a mother, you want to get married. And none of my friends have assets. And not all of them, but to make the point, the people I grew up with are generally unhealthy, whether that's their weight, they've picked up disease, they are not in serious relationship, they don't own any assets, they're primarily in debt, whether that's through education, through their card. And it's really sad. And I have my own opinions as a Bitcoiner as to how that came to be and why that is related to fiat. But the conversation when they say, well, I want more money. Why do more people have more money than me? But if you understand money fundamentally as really your contributions to society, it is like your effort and the value you contribute to those around you. The simple answer to making more money is be more valuable to people. It's like really simple. It's like, if you want more money, be more valuable, period. So if you don't like the value you get in return for your time and energy today, then like be more valuable tomorrow. If not, you don't deserve any more money, because that's literally how it works. But it does seem like a symptom in it. And it's super unfortunate. There's like a real divide from a lot of the people I grew up with and their beliefs and their health and their life today versus some of us that got into Bitcoin. And that's a conversation we have all the time, is an argument over wealth status and wealth gap. It's like, the simplest way to build more wealth is just be more valuable. And that's an objective statement, because you can believe whatever you want, but if the market doesn't agree with you, then you're wrong.
Yeah, and the destructive dynamic people get into is to get self-righteous about it. Like, I'm doing this and the market isn't rewarding me, and so the market is wrong, the world is wrong, the world is messed up, and we need to fix the world so that people who are doing the thing that I'm doing get paid more money than people who are doing things that pay more money. And that's extremely destructive, because what you should be thinking of your inability to attract money as a very valuable signal. The market is out there, it's telling you whatever it is that you're doing is not enough to meet your needs. You're unable to buy the house that you want. You're unable to live the life that you want. That means you're doing something wrong. You're doing something that's not valuable to others. And it's it's very valuable to have that information, particularly if you're young, to understand it, internalize it, not get upset about it, and then think about how to act upon it. Okay, clearly my business model of selling ice cream to people is not working. I need to try something else. I need to make my ice cream better. I need to make my ice cream cheaper. I need to get out of the ice cream business. I need to do something else. And it's sad to see more and more people move away from thinking about this in this way, and instead get dug in anger and bitterness about it. But of course, you can sort of understand where that comes from, because indeed there are a lot of reasons for people to be angry and bitter about the way that the economic system works. Because when I think about it, um, even though today we have the highest productivity in history, we have the ability for people to generate the most income because we have incredible tools. You have all of the world's information available for you online. You have all of the world's knowledge at your fingertips, and you can learn from anybody. You can learn anything you want online. Yet still, that doesn't change the fact that we don't have a good mechanism for people to save, and we all come from families that have not been able to save properly for at least 3 or 4 generations. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. Everybody's father and grandfather have had a hard time saving. Doesn't matter who you are. Your bank account has gotten confiscated by your government. Your money has gotten devalued by your government. You've gone through hyperinflation, or at least high inflation, somewhere in the last 3 generations of your family. This has been a defining feature for all of us, everywhere around the world, that we are one human race united by being robbed by central banks. It's the quintessential human experience. And that's, of course, something really consequential, and the world would be a lot better. My favorite thought exercise, perhaps, is to just imagine what the world would have been like if everybody in the world today had the opportunity for them and their parents over the last 100 years, then the grandparents, to have saved in a form of money that appreciates at just 2% per year. No hyperinflation, no high inflation, no devaluation, no bank confiscation, no bank failures. If everybody just had a fixed, or not necessarily a fixed supply money, but just the money that appreciates at around 1% per year. I mean, just imagine how different the world would be today. Imagine how much capital young people today would have available for them, how much savings they would inherit, how much savings they'd have when they start their life. So you'd be born, your family gets you some money as savings when you're born, and then when you're 25, that money has maybe doubled in value because it keeps appreciating every year. The money that you earned when you were 8 years old in your lemonade stand, by the time you're 25, it's appreciated significantly, and it can help you actually pay for your house. In that kind of world, people don't need to get into lifelong debt in order to buy houses, because A, their savings are appreciating, and B, people don't use houses as a saving account. And so houses don't get ridiculously expensive every day, because young people are up there competing with 65-year-olds, you buying houses as a bank account, buying houses as a saving account, buying the houses so that they could rent it out rather than own it, and bidding up the price of the house, making it even more unaffordable for you. So it's not just that houses are becoming more expensive because of inflation. Houses are becoming more expensive because people use them as bank accounts. So the demand for housing is heavily augmented by demand for houses as saving accounts. So you're looking to buy a house for you and your wife to start a family and have your kids in it, but there are 65-year-olds out there looking to buy a house as a retirement plan, as something that's going to save their wealth into their retirement. And so that's somebody who's been working for 35 years. What chance do you have to outbid them? It's highly unlikely that the average 25-year-old can outbid the average 65-year-old. And so housing is becoming very difficult to obtain. All kinds of things that you would like to have, and they become difficult to obtain. And the result is that people just need to keep running just to stay put. So you rent for 10, 20 years, you keep paying rent for 20 years, and that means you can save less. Whereas in a world in which you have savings, you buy the house, and then you don't have to pay rent, and then you accumulate more and more savings. And then when your kids grow up and it's time for them to buy a house, they can buy a house as well, because they also don't need to go up against 65-year-olds thinking of their houses as bank accounts.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think it's lost on people that a way to think about inflation is that they're expanding the monetary supply faster than humans are producing value and innovating. Like another way I like to think about Bitcoin is I'm long humanity by owning Bitcoin, because with my money supply fixed, I get the benefits of human innovation and human productivity. Like when humans innovate and produce more that makes food cheaper and education more accessible and travel easier, like I'm a net beneficiary of that. Whereas if I'm holding a currency like the dollar that's being produced so rapidly that they're producing more dollars than we are producing innovation as humans. And to your point, that's an insane concept to wrap your head around, given we're living in this world of AI and tech boom, and we've got now cars driving themselves with Elon Musk. It really puts into perspective how much money they're actually printing and how much debasement that our currencies are actually going through for the goods and services that you need in your life to still be working the wrong way. You know, you're running on a treadmill. You could be innovating and producing as a human as hard as you want, but if you're not getting a 20% raise year over year, and the housing market that you actually desire to live in for a life that you deem worthwhile is going up 21% year over year, then the currency is just outpacing your productivity. And so I don't think people appreciate that. And that's really just as simple as it is, like plain speak, that's just math. And then conversely, that means owning Bitcoin is being long humanity and subscribing to innovation and subscribing to us as a species being able to be more productive year over year, generation over generation, century over century. So I think that's lost on people. And you know what? Like the fiat mindset. And you know, I've thought a lot about this, and I've had really difficult conversations with people I grown up with and that I love deeply. The mental model that I like to use is fiat. It clouds the world. It makes it very foggy and difficult to understand. Meaning, I've used this analogy before. I think what death is to life, Bitcoin is to money. In that, you know, if I was never going to die, I'd eat donuts every day. I'd eat the steak tomorrow. I wouldn't get married for 1,000,000 years. I wouldn't go to the gym for 10 million years. It's actually the finite promise that my life is fixed is what allows me to value it in the first place. Today I'd have no ability to value today if tomorrow was always promised. And so it's the finite promise of death which gives value to my life. Bitcoin gives that finite promise to our time and our effort and our labor. It's impossible for someone on a fiat standard to value the paycheck they're getting right now. If there's theoretically infinite amounts of dollars, it'd be the equivalent of being able to live forever. And so I think that with fiat, it's very cloudy, whereas with Bitcoin, it's a mirror. And a mirror meaning it's strict objective truths. Is when I look in the mirror, I see exactly me for who I am, how much value I'm actually producing for the world, how much value the paycheck I'm actually getting today. And I'm able to make decisions based on my health, my time preference, my investment, my savings, my real-time expenses versus the income I'm generating. And with fiat, I like to think of it as it's cloudy. You can't see the world for what it is. It's impossible to measure the paycheck you're getting today. It's impossible to know how much an education at USC is worth. Is it actually worth $250,000? How would you ever know? And so I think that's another reason people struggle with Bitcoin is objective truths are difficult. The man that relies on a lie has a tough time looking in the mirror, right? And so I think that's another reason that, you know, the people that have a difficult time adopting Bitcoin, I think have a difficult time with truth and objectivity. And I think that humanity goes through, there's a cyclical nature in humanity where we build tools and sometimes those tools abstract us away from truth. At the end of the day, we are part of nature. We've been governed by Mother Nature and the immutable laws that Mother Nature instills. And sometimes we build tools and technologies that are intended to advance our species, but abstract us so far away from the truth. A really simple way to understand that is people are eating Beyond Beef veggie meat instead of a ribeye. And it's like you've abstracted yourself so far away from what's actually objectively true and real that you're eating junk that's giving you cancer as opposed to just eating the beef. And it's the same thing with fiat and money. And I think Bitcoin is coming bringing us back to the truth, and it's a system that's governed and ruled by the immutable laws of Mother Nature through proof of work. And because money is our time and energy in an abstracted form, and it is really more of a representation of ourselves than any other market good, then it becomes like a movement, like a driving force that leads into your health and leads into your time preference and leads into all of these other decisions. And yeah, how are you supposed to drive a car if you can't see through the windshield, if it's clouded and muggy? And then when you do get that mirror and you are able to see objective truth, it's probably initially very difficult. So you're like, wow, that's what I look like. That's what I'm actually worth. That's what I paid for education. But those that are able to persevere and find themselves through truth and make decisions with truth, live a better life, live a healthier life. So I don't know. That's like some of the conversations I've had with my friends. And the analogy I like to use is Bitcoin is a mirror to me, in a world where people have grown up in fog and can't see.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. I use something similar, which is essentially money is our ability to provide for our future self, controls our ability to provide for our future self. The better the money is at holding on to its value into the future, the further into the future you can see. So you have this money, and if you have a good expectation that this $1 million that I have right now is going to have its value maintained 10 years from now, I can count on roughly the same purchasing power. Well, then the world in 10 years from now is a lot less uncertain than if your expectation is that those $1 million are going to be worth $100,000. If they're going to be losing 90% of their value over 10 years, which is a pretty average user experience for the fiat user. So when I ran the numbers on fiat money supply over the 60 years from 1960 until 2020, the average fiat currency supply increased at around 14% per year, which means a 50% decline in 5 years. And that's about 70-80% in 10 years. So that's, losing 90% in 10 years is par for the course, basically, for your average fiat user. Obviously, if you're using the dollar or euro or Swiss franc, you get a much better shelf life for your money. It's declining at around 8% per year. But if you're using terrible national currencies, then you're getting maybe 90% decline in a year. So on average, it adds up to about 50% every 5 years. So the money that you have today, the expected value of it in 5 years from today in fiat is 50% off. So you're going to be half as rich in 5 years. So your ability to provide for yourself in 5 years from now is compromised, and your ability to think and plan ahead for your life in 5 or 10 years is severely compromised. And I think that explains so much. As you see, you mentioned people not getting married. I think this is a huge part of it. I think this is also a huge part about people not having kids. I think instinctively, perhaps one of the most important things that we want in life is to have children and give them a better life than what we have. In my third book, Principles of Economics, I mean, I go through the ideas of economics as understood from the Austrian school, and explain why we build civilization, why we as human beings trade, why we as human beings plan for the long term. And I think a good way of understanding human civilization is that it is a situation that emerges when people are able to reliably give their children a life better than theirs. And this is something that almost every father has told his son. I know growing up as a little child, my dad used to always say this to me, which is, the only thing I want to see in life is I want you to be better than me. And it always struck me as weird. Like, why would he want me to be better than him? Why does this doctor who's done all these incredible things care about me with my boogers and my ice cream becoming better than him? Doesn't he have better things to care about? And then you grow up and you have your own kids and you realize, yep, that's it. That's really all that there is to life. And everything that you want to do is just get to that point where you can have a child and then have them be better than you. And this is, I think, a huge motivation for people. It's instinctively what we want. We want to have children. We want to give them a better life. And then when you don't have the ability to provide for yourself in the long term, your ability to have these children and give them a better life is severely restricted and compromised. And therefore, it becomes far more likely that you would choose to just live your life one day at a time, escape into hedonism, go for short-term joy and short-term pleasure at the expense of long-term satisfaction and long-term happiness. Why invest in a relationship? Why invest in having kids? Why invest in trying to provide those kids with a better life? Because if I save, my savings are going to depreciate. If something bad happens to me and I leave the savings for my kid, by the time he's able to spend them, they would have likely declined in value significantly. And so I think this, it doesn't really often get mentioned as an explanation for why fertility rates decline. But I really think inflation is probably a big part of it. I think without inflation, people would likely have more enthusiasm about the future, and therefore that would be reflected in wanting to bring more kids into the future.
Principles of Economics, my complete guide to understanding economics, is now available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook from Saifedean.com, Amazon, and many more booksellers worldwide. And now I am also teaching a course based on this book on my website, Saifedean.com. Principles of Economics will run the whole academic year from September to June, and will have a new lecture every 2 weeks, as well as weekly live online discussion seminars open to learners from all over the world and from all walks of life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or a retiree, you are making economic decisions every day, and this course will arm you with the wisdom of centuries of economists to improve your economic decision-making. You'll also get a free book of Principles of Economics if you sign up for the course. Go to Saifedean.com and sign up now.
Yeah, I think that the broken money, there's a few different angles. I 100% agree with that. An inability to plan for your future, value the future, be confident about your future, disables you from having children. And so the metric is also, interestingly, it's the child per woman is going down tremendously as well. It's not as if there's different pockets of the world that are having tons of kids and others that are having lesser as much. The overall average of child per woman is crashing. And that also says because women are working a lot more. And there's an argument there that, women's rights has tremendously improved. And I think any human, despite gender or whatever, should be able to do whatever they want. And I think it's a great thing that women can now do more in the workforce. They can vote, right? A lot has changed in empowering women and women's rights. But there's also a monetary story there as well, which is dual income households have skyrocketed. And so I wanted to be very clear. I'm not making a comment on women's rights or anything. It's the insight that if your money is constantly being debased, inflation is constantly putting monetary pressure on not only your existing life, but your ability to plan for your future. And both you and your wife, or you and your husband, have to provide income, then it becomes also less attainable to grow a family, and at that, a big family, if both parents can't be present in the household. And so there's many different angles to arrive at the fact that having many kids is generally unattainable. And I think, just generally speaking, I think as a human, just being alive, there's an innate desire to be, one, part of something bigger than yourself, and two, part of something that will last longer than you will. And that's this idea of valuable connection that we all want. You always hear the story of the man on his deathbed. He's not talking about how much money he has, or he's not talking about how big his boat is. He's talking about his relationships and where he's found love and connection. And so I think we innately want those things as humans and being alive. And the most natural place to have found that is family. It's quite literally being part of something bigger than you as an individual person. And then it's quite literally building something that will last longer than you will in your bloodline. And so I think it is human nature. And money, I think monetary debasement has greatly weakened our ability to be human in that way. And I actually find Bitcoin very human along those same principles, and that Bitcoin allows me to be part of something quite literally bigger than me in this network, and something that will last longer than I will. And the last longer than I will implies confidence in the future, implies confidence in its security and durability. And so I don't know. I think things like Bitcoin and having children are very human. And kind of goes back to when I buy Bitcoin, I feel like I'm long humanity. I think the story of humanity is engineering a better world, and I want to be a beneficiary of that, and I want to contribute to that. So if I hold a money that's fixed, I'm perfectly positioned to benefit from all the productivity and innovation. There's no central party that can debase my participation out of that, and it allows me to do things that are very forward thinking that require a lot of confidence in the future, like having a lot of children and one of the parents at home staying at home and not needing a dual income household. Things like that are very simple. But if you look at the data, the amount of dual income households, the amount child per woman, divorce rates, and then combine that with our health. So a lot of our income goes towards staying alive, and a lot of government financing goes towards keeping us alive in healthcare and all sorts of like fancy diets and workout routines. So we're a sick population, we're an overweight population. Our population is crashing, we're producing less humans, and we're all working more. Like going from one income per household to two is literally 100% growth. It's doubling. So it's not a small amount of increase. It's a massive income increase. And we still are seeing less home ownership, still seeing rising debt levels. So I think it is all to do with broken money, in my opinion. There's serious merit in the fix the money, fix the world. Memes are real.
Absolutely. I think there's a part of me that looks at this at a very, very simple, almost video game caricature way of looking at the world, which is you get born into this world and there's one human body that you have. And it's just the natural instinct of all living things to want to survive and keep that body alive for as long as possible. And then at a certain point, you come to the realization that you can actually increase the size of your physical manifestation in this world by reproducing. Animals understand this instinctively. Humans understand this at a certain point in their early adolescence or late childhood. They figure out how babies are made. And I don't think most people think of it this way, but really, every child you have is half a human being that is part of you. It's literally a part of you. It's a physical part of your body that leaves your body and then becomes a human being on its own. So every child you have is half a you out there surviving after you. And so if you have two children, and you die and you've left behind two children, you've managed to keep the same amount roughly of physical matter in the universe behind you after you've died. So that can sort of be viewed as a pretty good way of looking at the object of life. Try and outlive your physical body by leaving behind enough genetic material or more genetic material behind you than you had. And so if you have more than two children, then you've succeeded. And if they have more children, if you as long as every generation has more than double the previous generation, then you're winning, because every child is half you, half somebody else. And so you're trying to shoot for three. Three really is the way to guarantee it, because two is cutting it too close, and you're reliant on them having two, then, and things could go bad for whatever reason. So you want to aim for three at least, I think, and that's that's the way I see it. I mean, it's almost video game in its simplicity, but I think if you thought of it this way, it helps you win that video game that is life. You come at life and you realize, all right, I want to have three children, and I want to give them a life better than mine. And if you just start with that as an objective for life, it puts everything into place. It organizes everything for you, because that's not easy. Having three kids is not easy. You need to have enough money for them. You need to build a relationship with somebody who will help you have them. And so you need to control yourself in all kinds of ways. You need to focus. You need to have a long-term focus. You need to sacrifice all kinds of small pleasures that you could have, all kinds of things that you could do with the money that you're saving for the future. If you don't have kids, you could blow that money away. If you have kids, then you might want to save it. So it necessitates a lot of sacrifice, but that's how these video game characters seem to be happy. That's how they win the game. If they manage to leave behind, as you said, on your deathbed, if you've left behind more than 2 children, you get the feeling that you've won. It's game over, I won.
Yeah.
And if you haven't,
Yeah, I mean, the physical matter piece is the children, and then you can extend it to like monetary matter, right? Like the way I live my life is wake up and be valuable today. Store that value in Bitcoin so I can take it with me tomorrow, and then love hard. Be selfless in a sense that, again, be part of something bigger than yourself. Optimize for the success of others. So love hard. Don't be selfish. Be valuable today. Take it all with you tomorrow, and have kids and contribute. And if you're able to pass on to the universe physical matter in children, and then monetary matter in Bitcoins, which is literally like time, energy, effort, value abstracted in a market good, that's about as good as you can be as a human being, all else equal. And you going back to the analogy that Bitcoin is a mirror, given all this context, because I do struggle. How can you be so repulsive towards this Bitcoin thing? I mean, to me, it's so obviously net good, net positive on philosophical levels that I didn't even know existed getting into Bitcoin. And obviously, I understand the journey of a Bitcoiner, and it's not lost on me the journey that I had, and that I didn't know all of these things. I know more today than I did yesterday, and that's kind of nature of being a Bitcoiner as well, as the amount we all learn and consume. So someone getting into it, I can understand their naivety, but the repulsive nature as if it's evil is just so bizarre to me. And I love the analogy of a mirror, because I think we grow up in a society that really struggles with the truth. I think we've gotten so far away. Like we built so many abstractions in social media, abstractions in government, abstractions in money, that we're so far away from the truth, and not the truth in we need the right person to be the CEO or the right person to be the president. The truth objectively, the truth as in physically, like Mother Nature levels of truth. And so I think you grow up, I was born in 1994. You grow up where I was born and the age I was born, time I was born. And the truth is not something that anyone welcomed, any of our teachers, any of our governments, any form of leadership. And so if Bitcoin is a mirror, and it's the first time you're really able to gauge and see and view objective truth and look at yourself and look at the world around you objectively and honestly, I think the repulsive behavior is just, it's terrifying and it's scary to grow up in a world thinking I should be eating Fruit Loops. I mean, all of the unfortunate lifestyle habits and choices that are imposed. And I think when you look in the mirror and you see the world for what it actually is objectively, according to Mother Nature and real truths, I think it's terrifying. And that's why I think Bitcoin is an ego test in many ways. In order to adopt Bitcoin, you have to kill your ego and the sense of who you think you are and who you think the world thinks you are and what you think the world is. If that doesn't map up to physical reality in the same way that proof of work enforces Bitcoin to map physical reality, then you have to kill that version of yourself in the world and your own ego in order to adopt Bitcoin. And in many ways, people aren't willing to do that. And it's the man that's reliant on lies, I think, has a tough time adopting Bitcoin. And to me, it explains the repulsive behavior, because you listen to our conversation, it's, I own this thing, my future is more certain. The value I bring to the future is more guaranteed. I get to be a net beneficiary of human productivity and innovation. And it's, how can you be so against this thing? And I do like the mirror analogy. And it leads me to this conclusion that today's world has a tough time with truth. Somehow we've gotten so far away from that as species.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you entirely. I think I've discussed this in the Fiat Standard. I think ultimately, when you've got an authority in society that can make money out of thin air, it can dictate truth also out of thin air. And so this really, in my mind, helps explain so much of what is wrong in the world. And that's why the chapters in the Fiat Standard are all fiat food, fiat states, fiat society, fiat family, fiat science, all of these things just become completely corrupted by the fact that with a money printer, the feedback mechanism from reality to your consciousness is severed. In the real world, if nobody has a money printer and you decide to believe something insane, the world is going to give you feedback. Your insane ideas are not going to get you food on the table. Your insane ideas are not going to concord with reality in a way that is constructed to you achieving your ends. And then you're going to have to snap out of that. And I think this, to go back to your idea about truth and ego, this is what would prevent people from becoming so bogged down in wrong ideas and in ego trips where they really become invested in believing things that are not true, which you see all around you in all kinds of things in society today. Now, when you take that away, when government can no longer, or when you take away the feedback from reality to your consciousness, then it's entirely possible for somebody to keep printing money in order to enforce a fake version of reality. And you see this in education, you see this in science, you see this in nutrition. At no time in history did humanity eat the kind of garbage that your government tells you should be eating today. You look at the food pyramid, they're essentially trying to tell you to eat like the worst slaves of history have ever eaten, which is the cheapest crops that usually go to feed animals. They go to feed slaves. If you wanted a slave, then you don't care about their well-being, and their health reflected in a few extra years of life and a few extra years of productivity is not worth having an entire lifetime of feeding them healthy, good meat. It's easier to just make more slaves and feed them all garbage and have them work the slave jobs than it is to feed them healthy food and then have them become healthy and have them live a happy, fulfilling life. It's better for them, obviously, but who cares about them? And that's essentially what we see with modern nutrition science. It's out there telling you the things that are good for you, the things that all of your ancestors have eaten for millions of years, science has shown are bad for you. And they just keep pounding this message to the point where it's stuck into people's minds because they have a money printer. They have a money printer that allows them to finance all the nutrition departments, finance all the nutrition journals, finance all the medical schools, finance all the dietetics association, all the medical associations. And these people in turn are able to dictate the agenda. If you're a doctor and you tell your patient to eat things that the medical society doesn't tell them they should eat, you could go to court and you could get disbarred and you could lose your license. And it's happened to several doctors all across the world over the last few decades. Doctors who have spent years telling their patients to eat garbage, and then they try it themselves. They stop eating the garbage, they add more meat to their diet, and they feel a lot better. And they start telling their patients about this, and the patients feel a lot better. But fiat reality doesn't care about reality. Fiat reality just says, no, we've got a standard of care. We've got dietary guidelines. You have to follow these. If you're not following these, then you're not being scientific. And so you can just completely annul reality. And this is what creates these people that hate Bitcoin, because Bitcoin comes along and says, nope, reality will not be ignored for longer. You could do a lot better by not ignoring reality, by believing in reality. And Bitcoin offers you a way to make that belief work, because now you no longer need to believe in it on so many levels. You no longer need to get access to the bank. You no longer need access to research proposals and funding from government in order to perform your scientific experiments. You no longer need to abide by the fiat truth, and you're able to dictate your truth based on reality as feedback from reality dictates. And you see people that are able to adjust that end up doing a lot better than people who don't adjust that. This is where Bitcoin derangement syndrome comes along, because people have just grown accustomed for so long to having their reality being shaped by the top-down money printer propaganda, that trying to jolt them out of that and opening their eyes and telling them, look, the world is not how you think it is extremely disorienting, and it's extremely dangerous for many of those people. Most people don't have the mental strength to handle this. and that's why they break down into all kinds of symptoms of Bitcoin derangement syndrome.
Yep, 100%. And it is, Bitcoin is governed by Mother Nature and its immutable laws because of proof of work. And whereas fiat is governed by human governance and abstractions. And the further, just on net generally, the further our species gets away from the physical realities of truth, then the more complexities we have. You can make the argument a technology like Nostr is trying to achieve a similar fate where you've got so much abstracted truth in corporations like Facebook and Twitter and Elon and such. So I think that's just a general trend we'll see, is that we've entered a digital age and we've built a lot of technology, but through that, a lot of abstractions, both monetarily in our social structures, in government. And I think things like Bitcoin and proof of work are a reversion to the means of being governed by Mother Nature and laws that us humans can't change and construe and manipulate. So, and that also, it's just beyond me that someone could value proof of stake, right? Like understanding these very basic concepts. They're philosophical and high level, but still very fundamental to who we are. And, proof of work is entirely necessary because the innovation is the digital tunnel that connects you to the physical reality. Without proof of work, you're governed by humans again. It's the same fiat world that we're trying to escape and evade from. And I think that, sometimes I've even grappled with, why do early Bitcoiners get to be so better off and successful versus others? Is that deserving? I went through that journey myself philosophically and intellectually when I was getting into Bitcoin and had my first bull run. And for one, I don't know of any other fair system or fair way to distribute a new money and grant people new wealth than being first and early to better money. But then even more so, I do think of it as a reward to go through the journey you just described. As a form of ego death and humility, it is like rewarding the best versions of ourselves and what we would want in our peers, is people that play by the rules, that are willing to be governed by truth and reality, that are willing to accept humility. That's the type of people that I would want to have wealth and wealth appreciation in society. People that aren't on ego trips, that don't concentrate towards power, right? That don't play political games, that don't lie. So I've also come to peace with that. And that makes me really happy about Bitcoin, is it's the people that are willing to be governed by the truths of the world are the ones that are accruing wealth in the wealth transfer. I think it's a really powerful, hopefully it's a powerful transformation, in that if those type of humans are the ones that have wealth over the next couple centuries, it makes me really hopeful of what the world will look like, because in theory, they're better humans fundamentally than those that can't face real truths.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody who's gotten into Bitcoin, probably even Satoshi himself, has at some point had to admit to being wrong. I think it's absolutely stunning if you read the initial, the first Bitcoin forum posts by the people that Satoshi sent the white paper to. There was very strong conviction that this is not going to work, and here are the reasons why it won't work. And it's absolutely amazing to read those things, because pretty much everything that all of the world's leading intellectuals and economists and thought leaders have come up with today was pretty much fleshed out on the Cypherpunk mailing list back in 2008 and 2009. All of the objections that you could come up, well, maybe not all, but a surprising number was conjured up by people back then. And clearly, this is such an out of the ordinary experience to think about Bitcoin and the world in which Bitcoin works, that it triggers so much cognitive dissonance in people that no, clearly this doesn't work. And it's amazing that some of these people, I know some of the people that were on the mailing list, are still skeptics of Bitcoin. I mean, they could have mined for 5 minutes in 2009 and secured enough Bitcoin to be financially independent for the rest of their lives. And yet they didn't. And then they saw it go from 0 to a cent, and then $1, and then $10, and then $100, and $1,000, and $10,000, and now maybe $100,000. And they're still stuck on their belief that, no, this can't work because my model of the world doesn't include this thing in it. And so clearly reality has to bend to my will rather than me changing my mind. Everybody had to go through that point of admitting that they're wrong, because if you didn't, you would have been the one who invented Bitcoin if you had not thought that it could work with reality. And, for me, I mean, even though I came from a perspective of valuing sound money and hard money and understanding the idea about money having low inflation rate, still for me, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I dismissed it. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was unworkable because, of course, gold is money. Gold is better money. Gold is going to be the thing that's going to work as money. And this thing is obviously going to not work. And of course, it was a very expensive mistake to have heard about Bitcoin early and ignored it for years based on this. But then eventually you swallow your pride, you get over it, and you realize it's more important to understand the world as it is than to continue to live in denial. A lot of people aren't able to do that. But I think Bitcoiners in general, I mean, maybe not all of them, but a large number of them must have gone through something like this. It flies in the face of our government propaganda. It flies in the face of all the economics we've learned. It flies in the face of even people who are anti the propaganda. So even if you're a gold bug and you think everything that's taught at economics and university is wrong, Bitcoin is still there to tell you that you're wrong too. And that's also a very bitter pill to swallow. But as I like to say, swallow the bitter orange pill today so you don't have to take the giant orange suppository tomorrow.
This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently. This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange. If you're listening to this podcast, you get that Bitcoin upends everything that government schools teach about money. Coinbits is the money app designed for people like you who understand Bitcoin and want to use it every day. Coinbits pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your debit and credit cards and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you save more in Bitcoin as you spend more. My favorite new Coinbits feature is Spending Insights, which gives you real-time feedback about how much of your money is chasing high-time preference, short-term gratification, and how much you are providing for your future with low-time preference choices. As always, Coinbits provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals, so you keep counterparty risk to a minimum. Coinbits also offers peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more. Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need with Bitcoin. Go to coinbits.app/Saifedean and get 3 months free. Again, that is coinbits.app/Saifedean, Saifedean.
Yeah. And it's important that it is painful and that it is expensive because that means it's working. Going back to being connected to reality and getting real feedback from the real world, from the real market, is that the fact that it's painful is real clear signal that you are wrong, not to fight it. But yeah, I don't know it, because if you think of Bitcoin as this piercing truth, this technological advancement in connecting the immutable laws of Mother Nature to a digital object that we can program to be perfect, then what does it say about the people that are against it? Is that a proxy to say that government and big corporations who are primarily trying to kill it and primarily trying to stop its adoption are then by proxy the biggest opponents of truth and the biggest opponents of objective reality, right? Because if I am just doing the math in my head, if Bitcoin equals objective truths, physical reality, honesty, humility, then those that are against Bitcoin are against those things. And so, I don't take it too far and to say that I'm able to judge the character of a man by their opinion on Bitcoin, because that's a little bit too much. But it's not that far off in that if you're making an active effort to suppress this thing, kill this thing, violate this thing, then it says more about like the man that can't face truth and tries to kill truth, suppress truth, hide truth. It says more about the man than the truths, right? Of course, everyone knows that. So I don't know. It's also Bitcoin's this like piercing bullet of sorts. It's this universal asset that it like when Bitcoiners are learning more about their government, more about their diets, more about their relationships, because it teaches you so much about yourself and those around you. So I don't know. It's interesting. Like I think what the United States is going through is kind of fascinating under that lens of, are we a country of truth? Like, are we actually a country of liberty and technology and freedom, or are we not? And I think the conversation around Bitcoin is kind of interesting. Is there's a lot of people within this country that believe the fundamental founding objectives of the nation. And then there's a lot of our leadership that maybe subscribes to that for votes and then violates it tremendously. And there is kind of this, like, I think there's an inner desire as an American to be about truth and objective truths and humility and freedom. And I don't know, like, what does it say about El Salvador? What does it say about Bukele? It's just interesting to kind of view Bitcoin as a digital objective truth. And if you oppose that and watching people grapple with that, it probably says a lot about them, speaking of governments and corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very astute observation. I think it's something that you see all the time. I think Bitcoin haters just always exude a sense of bitterness toward reality and rejection of reality. And ultimately, look, it's just a bunch of software. I mean, I could understand that you don't care about it. I can understand that you're not interested in it. These are legitimate positions that you could take. Your dollar works fine for you, and so you just don't care about this. But to be actively against it, to be actively hating on people just running software on their computer, seek help, really. Seek help within your soul.
Like, you're looking in the mirror. What's so scary?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're looking in the mirror and you're seeing the objective truth, like what's so terrifying about that? It's really like a therapeutic exercise. Like a lot of these people, like Peter Schiff, like it's as if we're all observing like transparent public therapy sessions of sorts.
Yes. And a lot of people need a lot more therapy than others. A lot of people, some people just get the hit quickly. You followed Bitcoin from the time it was $100 and it made it to $10,000. All right, that's 100x of you being wrong. Throw in the towel, call it a day, buy some Bitcoin, and stop agonizing over watching the price go up. Peter Schiff has been poo-pooing Bitcoin since it was under $10. So he's missed out on something like 10,000x returns during that time. And he's still highly convinced that he's right. Wish him a speedy recovery.
Yep.
All right, Jack, I wanted to ask you, what is, you mentioned living on a Bitcoin standard and moving on to a Bitcoin standard. So how do you do that in a practical sense? In terms of money, in terms of finances, and in terms of other aspects of life? What does it mean to you to be on a Bitcoin standard?
Yeah. So I don't own any dollars. I own 3 things in my life. I own my business. So I own Strike, shares and equity. I own my house. And then I own Bitcoin. So all of my liquid cash balance is in Bitcoin. I own no fiat currency and no other things. Practically, obviously, this hoodie I'm wearing, I own, but I don't own anything else. How I do it, the credit card is one of the most convenient financial services modern day banking has ever given us. because I get to spend the currency that only goes down without ever having to own it. So I merely spend on credit. So it's not as if I think a lot of Bitcoiners think I live on gift cards or I have to compromise on my quality of life by living on Bitcoin. And that's not true. I have a credit card. Here's my stack of credit cards, just like everyone else has them. And I go to restaurants and I go to sporting events and I go entertain myself and take my girlfriend on vacations. And I just swipe the credit card. And by that, I'm interfacing with fiat and spending fiat without ever having to own it. And then if I have expenses that exceed my income, then I just delve into my cash balance that is Bitcoin and I pay those off. And I think we also, so at Strike, I have a feature that our customers don't have yet. So this is the first time they'll be hearing this, is that I'm able to pay bills from my Strike account, like fiat bills, with my Bitcoin balance on Strike. And we'll be rolling that out over the next few weeks. And so that's how I've been doing it primarily. And the real innovation, I think, is that everyone in the world wants a checking account that's resistant to inflation. So what we've learned from customers is they don't want to live on gift cards. They don't need a different credit card. In fact, competing with big banks and with Amex on credit cards is tremendously difficult. You'd have to put a luxurious lounge in every major airport to compete with them, or you'd have to give more free wine, or you'd have to give more free flights. It's a very capitally intensive. It's not very economic business. These businesses don't make money on these products, and they benefit from the money printer, from the backing of the government. They are able to do things that are uneconomic and that are net negative on their balance sheet. And so we don't want to compete there at all. You should get all the rewards from your Amex and your Chase Sapphire, whatever, but you should have a checking account that allows you to hold your cash balance in something that is resistant to inflation that the government can't print. And so my cash balance is in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's going up, Bitcoin's up over 100% over the last 12 months. So my life has gotten more than half off, literally, because Bitcoin's doubled. And so my life gets cheaper. My checking account's resistant to inflation. My checking account appreciates on an average of 63% over the last decade. And then I just pay my bills with this Bitcoin checking account and I spend on credit. And that's it. And as we talked about, as a Bitcoiner, it really teaches you live within your means. So your expenses should not exceed your income, at least, sustainably over the long term. Maybe there's one-off purchases, but I have a low time preference. I aim to save. My expenses are only what I need to consume. I consume those on credit, and then my cash balance is in Bitcoin. So it's this inflation resistant checking account. And we built the technology for that. I think it's going to be a really popular product.
Yeah, I think a lot of people overcomplicate things in this regard, that they get really Puritan about it, that you have to live off of Bitcoin, you have to try and spend your Bitcoin. And I think that's really defeating the purpose. The point of money is to make life easier for trade. And so if your money is making it harder for you to trade with people who have the things that you want, if it's making it harder for people who want to buy your things, to buy those things from you, then it's getting in the way of your economic well-being. There's no need to be that extreme about it. And ultimately, the main thing that you need from the main benefit that Bitcoin gives you is the resistance to inflation, does not necessarily require you to be spending the money every day. So currently, as we were saying earlier, it's all about cash balances. If only half a percent of the world's cash balances are in Bitcoin, that means of all the things that you want to buy, roughly 0.5% of the cash balances of your counterparties, things you want to buy and things you want to sell, 0.5% of the cash balances of your counterparties are in Bitcoin. And so the average person has 0.5% of his cash balance in Bitcoin, which means that the likelihood that he's going to want to buy things from you that are in Bitcoin or sell you things for Bitcoin is very low. People, if you own 0.5% in Bitcoin, that's a very tiny position. And so you're not easily going to increase your well-being. You're not going to easily find somebody who's willing to exchange money. You're not going to be increasing your well-being, your cash balance in Bitcoin significantly with every trade. So drastically changing your position and allocation to Bitcoin if all you have is 0.5%, because buying a meal in Bitcoin or would drastically change the allocation. So for most people at this early stage of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is only 0.5% of its total addressable market, it's unlikely that you're going to be finding transactions with others in this regard. But that's fine, because what matters is you build your cash balance in Bitcoin. Because cash balances in Bitcoin are how we win. Taking cash balances away from government bonds and from government money is how we kill the inflation beast. If we don't hold their cash balances, they can't rob our purchasing power. And the more people escape being robbed of their purchasing power, the less purchasing power is taken away from us to finance all kind of horrific things that governments do. So you can still have the main benefits of Bitcoin. You can still protect yourself from inflation. You can still starve the beast while still getting to spend your Bitcoin. The important thing is that you just keep growing your cash balance. That's the way that I see it. And it's great that your service allows people to do this, because the more convenient it becomes for people, the easier it is for them to grow their cash balances in Bitcoin. Whereas if it was difficult and it was complicated to go in and out from Bitcoin to fiat, then it becomes more difficult to grow your cash balance in Bitcoin. You need more and more cash balances in fiat, and that just sets us back. So it could actually be counterproductive if you're insisting on spending Bitcoin, and then that ends up reducing the amount of cash balances that you can accumulate. If it ends up reducing the amount of sales that you can make, let's say you have a business and you're handicapping yourself so you're earning less money because of it. All that means is you get to accumulate a smaller cash balance. And the size of the cash balance is the scoreboard, really. Currently, there's about $200 to $300 trillion of fiat out there. There's only $1 trillion of Bitcoin. That's the scoreboard. We need to get the number of cash balances in Bitcoin to become bigger. That's it. So reduce your expenses as much as you can, become as economically efficient as you can, increase your earnings as much as you can, and stack as hard as you can. That's how we win. That's it. It's not about virtue signaling by saying, I bought my coffee with Bitcoin. Don't walk an extra hour so that you can get to the coffee shop that accepts Bitcoin. Work that extra hour, have more income, and stack sats with it, or just quit coffee and stack more sats with it.
Yeah. And I agree. And I learned all these things very naturally through building Strike. So with Strike, you referenced our remittance product earlier, where we're swapping between currencies in Bitcoin. And what you learn is a sat is as good as a dollar, and a dollar is as good as a sat, literally 24/7, 365, any point, any time, programmatically too, by the way. So like a dollar can become Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can become a dollar at any point 24/7. So this idea that is like a mental model people need to understand. Like it's not as if, people think I have my dollar stash and my Bitcoin stash and they're separate and I can't touch this one or that one. They're more or less the same. It's, again, where you're just storing your cash balance. That's the decision you're making at the margin. So that one, I realized that. I was like, okay, well, I can't ever own too much Bitcoin and not have enough cash, because my Bitcoin can be my cash literally whenever I want. So that's like a rational fear. Then the next was, I always was one of those people, naturally, just growing up in a fiat world, if I need a rainy day fund of cash. So everyone goes from having 1% of your net worth in Bitcoin, and then you read the Bitcoin Standard, and then it becomes 20%, and then you go through a bull run, and then no matter you like it or not, it becomes 70% because it appreciates so much, and then you build more conviction, and it's 90%, but there's always that 10% or 15% in cash. And I went through a market cycle where my cash pile got crushed in Bitcoin terms, where it could have been a lot of Bitcoin, and I kept a pile of cash just because I thought I had to, and it became not a lot of Bitcoin at all. And I sat to myself and I thought, what's stopping me from owning all of my liquid wealth in Bitcoin? And this idea where I have a checkings account and a savings account and then a Bitcoin stash, there's no difference between checking and savings. Like, your liquid wealth is you are saving for tomorrow. You are saving for like an undetermined event in the future. This idea of checkings versus savings is dumb. What do I own? I own a house. Why? Because I consume that house. I have to live in it. So that's a market good that I actually am using. I don't own it to save in it. Okay, I own equity. What is that? That is my time, energy, my effort, my value to society. I own equity in a business. I value that. I think it's worthwhile that I'm able to monetize my hard work. Okay. And then everything else I just put in Bitcoin. I talk to customers and it's like, well, what about the taxes? And it's like, yeah, I'd rather give the government a portion of my capital gain than have gotten debased. Because if I made a capital gain, that means I avoided debasement. And so even the fear of taxes is irrational because I'd rather owe the government 20, 30, 40% of the gain I made by avoiding debasement in the first place. And I measure debasement in sats. I don't measure debasement in CPI. And so I'm happy to share in my capital gain because I evaded the ultimate scam, which is sitting in cash. And so then I realize I come to this conclusion where I'm like, wait a second, this can just be solved with software because whenever I talk to our customers, the one thing they want help with is owning more Bitcoin. And listen, I can't help people be more valuable or get a bigger promotion or get a windfall of cash from a bonus or something. I can't solve that with software. But what I can solve is allow you to go from 50% of your net worth in Bitcoin to 100 and make it so that your lifestyle and quality of life doesn't change. Still use the same credit cards. We can build software to optimize for the security, the accounting, the taxing, so that you have no problem filing taxes. You have no problem calculating and doing all the accounting work. And it just allows you to grow your Bitcoin cash balance. And that's really like the natural evolution I had with, wait a second, this is actually just purely logical. And all of these irrational fears I had were because I didn't think from first principles and be a Bitcoiner. And so I don't know, it's one of the products that we've built that was purely born out of my own demand and seemed to resonate with customers enough where we built it for production and built it so that we could scale it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's great to hear about this new product, and I'm sure your customers will be very excited about it. Anything else you want to tell us about what you have down the pipeline at Strike or in your own life or other products?
I don't know. I think, the mantra we use internally is we think Bitcoin's the best money in human history, and we're here to push its adoption forward. So those type of products is what we're all about. Just try and listen to customers. The notion of humility, being a good listener, thinking for others, not being the founder that thinks they have to predict the future and be on an ego trip as if that's my job. And so we just try and listen to Bitcoiners and push adoption forward by building tools that enable people to own Bitcoin more and trust the institution that they buy from and be more accessible in markets like Nigeria. So no, my message to Bitcoiners is just keep communicating with us, telling us what you guys want, because we want to be the institution that's focused purely on Bitcoin and not shitcoins to do this type of stuff for you. So looking forward to doing more of that.
All right. Well, Jack, thank you so much for this. This has been fascinating and wonderful as always. Wish you all the best of luck with Strike. We'll post the links to Strike and the Strike blog and Jack's Twitter on the show notes. And if you haven't checked out Strike, I highly recommend checking it out. Thanks again, Jack.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for your influence on me, man. It means a lot, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you. It means a lot to hear that coming from you. Thanks a lot.